on the line right now, does a tremendous job covering the Eagles for ESPN.com and 97.5 The Fanatic. Down in New Orleans, Mr. Tim McManus on the Comcast Business Hotline. How you doing today, Tim?
Doing very well, Ty. How about you?
Doing well. Thank you for coming on as usual. We appreciate it. I want you to talk about something that you can help us maybe articulate. We've been looking at some of the things that are different this time with the Eagles compared to last time. And we looked it up. Last Super Bowl, Miles Sanders, 6 carries, 17 yards. Obviously, now you have Saquon Barkley. Is there a way to quantify the upgrade, no disrespect to Miles Sanders personally, as a football player from Miles Sanders to Saquon Barkley in this football game?
Yeah, so Sanders did a really nice job while he was here. And this offensive line and this offense has proven that if you have a good running back and you put them behind this offensive line, that they can be a 1,000-yard rusher, they can be productive, they can have big games, Pro Bowl moments, all that kind of stuff. Saquon Barkley is one of the best running backs that's ever played football. I mean, he just is. This season that he's put together is one of the best of all time. If he has just 30 yards in this upcoming game, he's going to be number one all-time in rushing yards in a single season, including playoffs, passing Terrell Davis. There's only been 2 players in the history of the game at the running back position who have won the rushing title and also a Super Bowl. Emmitt Smith, Terrell Davis, Saquon Barkley's 1 win away from becoming the third of that elite group. And so that's what it is, man. I mean, this whole season isn't what it is without Barkley. When their fortunes changed, it changed because they decided to put the offense through him and have him be the centerpiece. And it's really just had this residual effect where, all right, now they're number one in time of possession throughout the course of the regular season. So what does that do? It takes pressure off of the defense and allows them to become even greater than they would otherwise be. And so it's just really hard to overstate the importance of Barkley to this team.
What does the preparation look like from the team right now? I mean, we're sitting here 3.5 days out from Super Bowl Sunday. What does it look like from your end?
Yeah, Ricky, so we had a chance to talk to a decent amount of the players today. It wasn't just guys at the podium, but also like assistant coaches and basically everybody on the roster was made available. And so I went table to table and was talking to guys, and they're just like, man, can't wait to get onto the practice field. Like, they've been here since I've been here, which has been Sunday afternoon, and today marks their first practice. And so that's kind of normal when you're going through a regular week, but this obviously isn't a regular week. They've been in New Orleans, in their hotels, basically going through meetings. They have gone over, so they're officially the quote-unquote home team, so they have access to the Saints practice facility. That's where they're working this week, and they've had time to go there, and they've worked out and do all those kind of things, but they're just like, now is the time where the actual on-field prep begins. They're super excited for it. So the coaches have just been keeping them locked in and meetings and, just making sure that the mental side is right. Players will get some downtime here and there. Like we've spotted them, a few, like a handful of Jalen Carter and a few of the other guys have been spotted out, eating together, sort of taking in the local scene. But it's been a lot of waiting around, and now they get to sort of do the real on-field work starting today.
Jim, another thing we've been talking about is Nick Serianni and how it seems like from the outside he's grown some since since his last trip here. And he's still the same human. He's still an emotional guy, but maybe he channels it a little bit better. You've observed him both times, obviously. Do you notice anything different from the head coach, who we remember was crying, and this is a knock on crying, but you rarely see a coach cry before a game. He was pretty keyed up. Do you notice anything different this time?
That's exactly what I thought of when you started that question, is thinking of him right before during the national anthem, and just tears running down his face. It's part of what, and Jeffrey Lurie was talking about this on media night on Monday, about what makes him who he is and great. And also, as Lurie said, it can also be a weakness. But I feel like Serianni has done a nice job of channeling it better. And it's obviously a work in progress. He made the joke, like it's hard to undo like 40 plus years of habit. So it's not like he's perfect, nor is he expected to be. But I think even if we go from the Cleveland Browns game on, where he obviously got heated and went after a fan, and It felt like a sort of unstable team at that time. And oftentimes teams will take their cues from the head coach. And so part of his growth has been learning just how to channel it, when to let it loose. And I think he still shows it, and players appreciate that, and they don't want him to just do this 180 and be something that he's not, because then he goes into fraud territory. Like, they like that he's authentic, even if it's not understood necessarily from the outside. But he's picking his spots. A lot of the emotion that you're seeing now is behind the scenes, and he's more calm-handed, I think, in a public setting in key moments in big games. And I would say that's one area where he's definitely grown since the last time these guys played in the Super Bowl.
How do you figure the young guys, like the rookies on this team, kind of stand up to the pressure of the Super Bowl?
Yeah, Rick, that's a great question. I was just thinking about this today. So, like, normally if you have, especially let's just focus in on Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Like, if you had two guys in the defensive secondary who were rookies in a Super Bowl going up against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, like, wouldn't a lot of the discussion in a typical situation revolve around those guys? And, like, how are they going to hold up? Like, is Reid just going to exploit them? Is Mahomes going to exploit them? But that conversation hasn't really been happening. And I think that's a credit to the way that those rookies have gone about their business throughout the course of this year, where they've been so steady and so stable that you don't even think of them as rookies anymore. But obviously this is going to be the biggest game that they've ever played, and they're going to need some of the guys who have the experience to help sort of shepherd them. That's really where it becomes important to have guys like Lane Johnson and Brandon Graham on your team. And Johnson has been really good as a leader, I think, this year. And he was setting the tone early during this ramp up to the Super Bowl. And even in before the championship game in the NFC, I'm just saying, like, when the moment gets bigger, I make sure to not put any extra into it mentally, to treat it exactly the same. Easier said than done, of course. But these guys have been trying to show them how to go about their preparation to make sure that they don't start swimming before this big one.
We're speaking with Tim McManus. Does a tremendous job covering the Eagles for ESPN.com and 97.5 Fanatic. He's live down in New Orleans. I got to ask you about another comparison, because let's take Jake Elliott out for a moment. Special teams, I still think that Tony return, more than the Bradbury holding call, which was a big play, really was the backbreaker in that first Super Bowl. So far this year in the special teams in the postseason, they forced a lot of turnovers. They've been really, really good in the season, taking out this postseason if we remove Jake Elliott for a moment with long kicks. How confident are you in this year's special teams not making the big mistake the way they did last time?
It's a matchup that's so important to point out, because I think most of us can say that the most likely scenario is that this is going to be a close game.
Yeah.
It's good on good. And there's just, like, it could come down to the fourth quarter and perhaps a big moment on special teams. So that the Eagles, outside of Elliott's struggles, have done better in limiting those big plays on special teams. And since the playoffs have started, they've had extra attention. Some of the starters that weren't on kickoff coverage, as an example, were added to make sure that it was buttoned up and that there weren't big gainers like we have seen at certain times throughout the course of the year. And so the emphasis is certainly there. I think that Clay overall has done a nice job. But if you flip it to the Kansas City side, that's a well-coached special teams unit that the Chiefs have leaned on at times. This is a Chiefs team that has won 12 games this year by one score. Right? So, I mean, they're used to those close games, and they've leaned on, like, some big plays from the special teams to get it done. And so it could very well come down to it. And, that leads the mind right to Jake Elliott. It just hasn't been his best year. He's a clutch kicker who just hasn't had a good season. And so how will that manifest in the Super Bowl? Is he just going to revert back to the Elliott that everybody's become accustomed to here? Or is he going to follow the trend and be a little bit shaky, especially once you get to 50 yards and out? So it's something that's worth highlighting, Ty, and obviously, we're going to see how that unfolds on game day.
I think a big question for me, a lot of people, can the Chiefs' defense hold up against the Eagles' offense for 4 quarters?
Yeah, so they have one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL, and Steve Spagnuolo. And like the matchup, if you have to kind of narrow in on what's the matchup that's going to decide this game, it could very well be Jalen Hurts against Spags. Spags is going to draw up a number of blitzes, and it's complicated because it can come from anywhere at any time. You'll have somebody at the corner who's not even showing it, and the next thing you know, he's coming, and Hurts is going to have to be able to account for that in real time. Overall, I feel like Hurts has done well against the blitz, but this is going to be his biggest test of the season. As we know, so much of this can be alleviated if the Eagles do what they've been doing all year, and that's just racking it up on the ground with Saquon Barkley. I don't expect the Eagles to really change their stripes here. I think that the Chiefs, can be gotten on the ground, and if there's any unit to do it, it's this one. And so I feel like that's really going to be the recipe here is, make it manageable once they get into the pass game. Like, continue what we saw against the Commanders where Hurts had those defined quick reads that he was able to get the ball out of his hand into space, into his playmakers' hands, and let them create. It doesn't have to be overly complex. I don't think that you have to dial up a ton of deep shots to sort of lean on what's gotten you here, and that should be enough against even what is a formidable Kansas City defense.
It's going to be interesting, Tim. We really appreciate it. We heard about the illness with Jalen Carter before we let you go. What I was thinking was perhaps, since he hasn't been with the media much, is perhaps he has I don't want to talk about what happened in Georgia flu. What are you hearing so far about that illness?
Well, if we just kind of connect the dots a little bit, so there were some players that were dealing with an illness before they got here as well. Nolan Smith, who's very close with Carter. Also, he was walking around at the NovaCare complex right before we got here. I think that was that Friday or Saturday, and he had a mask on. So there has been an illness that's been going around the team a little bit. So maybe it's related to that. But this is obviously the biggest of big games. I expect everybody to be out there.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Tim. Have fun. Be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good, guys. Thanks.
All right. That was Tim McManus on the Comcast Business Hotline. Does a tremendous job covering the Eagles for ESPN.com and 97.5 The Fanatic. Tim seems to think it's just football at this point. But Saquon's going to get the ball. Saquon is a huge difference maker, and that could also help with some of those crazy blitzes. You blitz a corner, Saquon's up the middle, and he
one
cuts.
less guy to beat.
Boom, it could you don't know where it's coming from. You don't know when it's coming. But Saquon can make it a lot easier. So that was a big thing to take away there. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Really appreciate it. If you want more of this content, make sure you like and subscribe. And you can do that kind of over here if you want more of the best show ever.